Well, today we are talking about neuropathy. So thank you all for coming out. This is kind of an interesting little topic for me to go over. It seems as though a lot of people should get this, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand what it is, right? And so we're going to go over some of the things that it is and the things that it is not and see if we can figure out a way to help you guys treat it, okay? So first, a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Chambers, John Chambers. I am a chiropractic neurologist. What the heck does that mean, right? I am a chiropractor who has lots of extra training in neurology, blood chemistry, endocrinology. I've decided to take my chiropractic degree to its fullest extent and practice natural medicine and be a primary care physician for whatever that means. So as we go about learning about the nervous system, it's important to really realize which angle we're coming at it from. So there'll be a little bit of a discussion today about the difference between what I do and the difference between what other medicine does. But in the end, we're using the same studies, we're using the same information, we're using the same examination tools that your neurologist at Asante or Providence uses, hopefully. And we'll go through each of the things that indicate what actual neuropathy is, okay? So I'm assuming people here have neuropathy, right? And there are lots of reasons for neuropathic pains and problems. So what is neuropathy in the first place? Anybody have any ideas?
Disruption of the nerves.
Okay, that's actually a perfect example of what it is. It doesn't have to be peripheral. A lot of people talk about peripheral neuropathy as a neuropathy. Neuropathic problems happen when a nerve stops sending the correct signals. And it can happen for a whole bunch of different reasons. You can have mononeuropathy, one nerve is problematic, and that's usually from an injury. You can have multiple nerves be problematic, and that's called polyneuropathy. So when you have polyneuropathy, you often have hands and feet. That's peripheral, polyperipheral neuropathy. Ugh, tongue twister. But anyway, those patterns are very typical with a lot of different things. Lots of things cause them. And that's unfortunately what makes it difficult. Who treats it? What do we do for it? Who do we go to for neuropathy? Any ideas? That's exactly how the medical world looks at it. Like, I don't know, is it your thing? Is it my thing? I don't know. Who treats this? The problem is that a lot of things cause it, so a lot of doctors have to know how to treat it. Unfortunately, in the medical world, it's been diagnosed that nerves die, and once they die, that's it. You can't do anything for them. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the famous quote, they're only mostly dead, right? They're not necessarily all the way dead. If they're still reporting pain, then the nerve is still alive. Unfortunately, pain is the last thing to go. So you get a lot of pain without a lot of other sensations. But the difficulty is that when those nerves, as they die, and they report inappropriate data, right, back to the brain, they're giving you all kinds of mixed signals. And unfortunately, for those of us who suffer from those kinds of problems, that messes with everything. So what's the biggest problem in neuropathy? What do you think?
Balance.
Balance. Pain is a pain, right? But once it affects your balance, you lose your autonomy. You can't be on your own, right? If you don't have balance, you have to be watched over. And unfortunately, if you can't feel from your feet, you disrupt something called proprioception, or where am I in space? And as that's disrupted, your vestibular system, your inner ear, can't correlate its feedback with what the feet are experiencing, and so you end up losing balance, right? So a lot of times I'll put somebody who has neuropathy through a balance exam, and they don't know that they don't have good balance, but they can hardly stand up. And if you take their vision out of the picture, have them close their eyes, they're a mess, and they fall over. And unfortunately, we can't go through life without ever closing our eyes when we're walking, because we have to blink, right? So the problem with neuropathy is that it affects so many different things. Your brain is constantly searching for data, trying to figure out where it is. In fact, there are a lot of things that say that the brain really only has two primary functions. Where am I in space, and where is space in relationship to me? So now we're talking about this stuff that creates pain for us, clear out in our feet or in our hands, maybe with an injury or without an injury. And these nerves are giving inappropriate signals back to the brain, or no signal at all back to the brain, and the brain can't assess where things are. So you go to step, you step too far. Or unfortunately, you step on something and don't know it. And that's when an infection happens. That's why neuropathies lead to gangrenous wounds and all kinds of things like that, and you end up having your toes chopped off and then your feet, right? So what are the primary conditions that cause neuropathy? What's the biggest one, you think?
Back injury?
Diabetes.
Diabetes. Yep. Back injuries happen, and they can disrupt it just as easily, but diabetes is probably the biggest one. In reality, the nerve needs 4 things to survive, okay? The ones up here get this a lot easier than the ones down there. 4 things. First of all is oxygen. You can actually be anemic enough, right? Not carry oxygen well at all to ruin the nerves in your fingers and toes. Alcoholic neuropathy is a big one. Secondary, it's after diabetic neuropathy, but it's a big one. It's usually not from sugar, it's from B vitamins. I didn't hear what you said.
I'll drink to that.
I'll drink to that, absolutely. So first thing is oxygen. Second thing is glucose, so that's where your diabetes comes in. Too high or too low. Hypoglycemics often think that they're safe. Oh, I can't ruin my nerves if my blood sugar is just too low. You can actually. If they aren't getting enough signal because there's no fuel, it's not going to work out. Third thing is activation, or turning that nerve on. We've all heard the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you just sit there, you're going to lose your nerves, right? Or if they're injured and can't be turned back on very easily. This is where rehab stuff comes into play and turning the nerves back on. You know, a lot of people will use electricity and things like that. Has anybody ever seen or heard of a nerve conduction velocity test? Okay? Yeah. What do they do to you?
Stick you full of needles and then a little electric.
Right. They very gently poke you with thousands of needles and turn on the electrical currents to those needles to see if the nerves will actually give a reading or not. So nerve conduction velocity testing is still the standard at diagnosing peripheral neuropathy. But it's fairly easy to diagnose when you talk about just sensation. And I believe that what's been lost is the standard neurology examination. Can you turn it on? Can you feel this? Can you feel that? Is it hot? Is it cold? Can you tell? Is it different from one side to the other? So a lot of things that we can use to diagnose and determine how to treat, more importantly, activation problems. The fourth thing is an inflammation problem. Has anybody had any swelling before? You twist your ankle or your wrist and all of a sudden you've got sausage fingers and you can't feel them very well. They get all weird. Well, a lot of times when you have too much inflammatory response, that nerve will actually die. Okay, so not neuropathy, but a nerve problem is something called Alzheimer's, right? And that's swelling in a certain part of the brain that causes destruction of the hippocampus. So it's the same thing, it's nerve, it's just in the central nervous system, not in the peripheral nervous system. So those 4 things, oxygen, glucose, activation, and control over inflammation. Every approach to treating neuropathy must have that or you're missing something, right? So let's talk about what the medical world actually does for neuropathy. What kind of treatments are available in the medical world? Any thoughts?
Drugs.
Okay, what drugs?
I don't know.
Gabapentin. And what is gabapentin trying to, that's the most famous drug for neuropathy. What's it trying to do?
Drug interference, I think.
Make you not feel, right? Shut that nerve down. Let's just, it's giving us all kinds of the wrong signal. Let's just shut off the signal altogether. What does that do to balance, do you think? People, yes. And this is why there's big warnings on gabapentin labels that you should not, until you know exactly how your system is going to react, you should not operate heavy machinery. You should not drive a car. You should not walk, until you know how things are going to affect you. What other interventions are there medically, do you think?
Amputation.
Okay. And actually severing the nerve is an option nowadays. They'll go and they'll say, oh, you have pain out here on the outside of your foot. No big deal. We'll cut the sensory fibers to that nerve. You won't have any pain in your foot. I'm glad to see that almost everyone's like, what the? It seems like a terrible idea to me, right? Because you won't have any control over that foot at all. And that ain't coming back, right? You're not going to rehab your way out of that one. It's just not going to happen. So the medical treatments for neuropathy, they aren't that good, right? You diagnose it, oh my gosh, you have neuropathy. Okay, doc, what do I do? Well, you can either shut the nerve off chemically or we'll cut it for you.
Would a vitamin regimen change
change that.
Okay? But we're talking medical, right? We're talking what the doctors actually are doing for this. You're right, absolutely. If you can meet the needs of the nerve, now you're stepping into my world. Well, let's not give up on this thing. It's still reporting something. Let's do something for it, right? But in the medical world, this is the treatment and the standard of treatment for that. So unfortunately for us, the insurance companies love standard of treatments. What's the standard protocol for this kind of a thing? And it doesn't end up doing that well, right? So there's difficulties out there in the actual diagnosis first and in the treatment of neuropathy. Very commonly, a doctor will say, well, how bad is your neuropathy? Well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly can you not feel your foot? Or how badly does your foot hurt, right? And is it just that foot or is it the other foot? Is it your hands and your feet? What are we talking about here? And you'll say, oh, I can only feel this foot on Wednesdays or something like that, right? Whatever that might be. And so they might choose a watch and wait period. They might say, okay, let's just see if this gets worse. What happens with that approach?
It gets worse.
It gets worse, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. That's one of the cardinal rules. So you stop turning that nerve on, and it's got to be with a frequency. Think of a little kid running around in their bare foot, pitter-patter of little feet, right? How often do you think they feel their feet?
Every step.
They feel everything, okay? That's the way the nervous system is designed, is to feel everything. Not even just the big, huge things, but also the little intricacies from point A to point B, all those other things. And they're mapping their brains, they're doing all kinds of different things as a child to learn and to grow. It's that feedback that gives their brain the growth patterns that it has, okay? So now we all think, well, I'm an adult, I can't learn new things. It doesn't help. My brain is done growing, it's done improving, I'm retired, I'm just hanging out. Unfortunately, that idea of just hanging out ends up causing the epidemic of retirees who just drop dead, right? And unfortunately, that's a reality in our world right now. We work until we die. That's not good. So to increase the quality of life, we have to come up with a treatment plan that actually takes into account those 4 things. Does anybody have any questions about those 4 things first? Oxygen and glucose, activation of the nerve, and control over inflammation. Now, we've taken in every cause of neuropathy, even if it's traumatic, right? Even if you've hurt yourself, and now this nerve is trying to rework. Are nerves actually capable of healing?
They can mend, but can they ever really heal?
Okay? Your nervous system as a whole is really good at adaptation. So if you get a concussion, somebody knocks you on the head, and it never is treated, really what happens is you adapt. Oh, I can't look that way. That's okay, I'll just move my whole body. Right? We adapt to the weaknesses that we have. That same thing happens in our peripheral nervous system. If we can use another sensation to feel it, we will. Okay? That can both help and hurt us. So we might get an inappropriate feeling in our foot, and we might adapt to that, but we might also be able to use some other feeling in our foot to give us better information. Okay? So the nervous system can actually regrow. Nerves can regrow. They just do it very slowly, and they don't do it without encouragement. Does that make sense? So we've got to find a way to encourage these nerves to grow. So number 1 rule is don't just sit. Soap operas will kill you. You've got to get up and walk. You've got to move, okay? Don't just sit. So the idea of that is exercise. I mean, you've got to activate this nervous system, okay? Now, let me tell you a little bit about the approach that we take for this and why we're doing a neuropathy class in the first place. Well, as a functional blood chemist, I read labs all the time. And I look for weaknesses in oxygen and weaknesses in glucose and problems with inflammation. I look for those all the time. The difference is I don't have to wait until your foot fell off to say your foot is going to fall off. I don't have to wait for that. I don't have to wait until you're even diabetic. How many people have heard this? Well, you're not quite diabetic yet. Come back in 6 months. Then when you are diabetic, I'll give you a drug for diabetes. Wait a minute. We're going to give me 6 months to die a little more and then we're going to treat me? I don't have to wait for that. Again, I'm outside of the box enough to think, no. Backpedal. What can we do to improve this glucose control so much so that not only are we not inching towards diabetes, but we're running away from diabetes? Let's get this thing better, right? So when we take that kind of approach to neuropathy, we find out what can we do to alleviate the burden, decrease the inflammatory response, right? Increase oxygenation, increase glucose control. I can't tell you how many people come in here and they're like, you know what, I don't like to eat breakfast. Don't make me eat breakfast. And I think, well, you know who doesn't like to eat breakfast? Diabetics. You've just told me what's wrong. You're not feeling well because you're not getting oxygen or glucose control in your system. So if you don't feel like eating breakfast in the morning, you're having a significant blood sugar problem. You should feel hungry when you wake up. Okay? So same thing happens.
Lunch then.
Say that again?
I said that would be lunch then.
It would be lunch? And when you wake up? Yeah, whatever time you wake up. I guess I shouldn't call it, I won't label you. You have 30 minutes to eat after you wake up, whether that's at noon or whatever time it is. What we do here, though, is it focuses a lot more on the activation portion of this. There are things that you can do to turn back on the nerves. So think about the sensations that you can feel. Vibration is a sensation that we feel. And that may not be felt very well. We have a whole exam that we do that will identify and quantify exactly how neuropathic you are. We can go through and with the numbers. This is not a chiropractic thing. This is not a chiropractic neurology thing. These are standardized forms that every neurologist has access to, okay? So we go through and we find the different things that you can't feel. Vibration is one of them. Pain and temperature are one of them, right? A lot of times you go and you put your foot in the hot water and you think, oh, it's not hot yet. I'll wait a little longer. And your skin falls off because it was really hot. You just couldn't tell, right? Or cold, same kind of a thing. You just can't feel it well enough. So being able to feel temperature is a big deal, hot or cold, and to be able to feel pain. Now, a lot of times with neuropathy, that's the thing that gets people going the most. That's all they can feel. Their brain only uses that nerve. So it is vibration, but it feels like pain. Or it is a light touch of my shoe, but it feels like pain. Because that's how my brain is interpreting it. That's the part of the nerve that's left. Okay? We go through this examination and we figure out all the different numbers that actually fit with this so that we have a baseline. One of those is balance. One of the things we look at is balance. We look at your gait. Can you actually move when you mean to? That kind of a thing. We talk about other things that could possibly be causing the neuropathic problems. But once we figure all those things out, we go to work on activating it. Now, if there is enough nerve loss, okay, this is the bad little cloud, dark cloud at the bottom. If the nerve is dead enough, we may not be able to revive it, okay? It just might not happen. Usually what we see is a very low score on that examination. So it's easy to tell. Do the exam. What's at the bottom? Those ones might not work. But they still might. So sometimes we're gluttons for punishment. We give it a try, right? We try to change the nerve, and that's the whole idea, is what can we do to make this different? The next little portion of that exam up, a little bit better, it usually takes a certain amount of time. Has everybody heard of neuroplasticity? Do we know what that means? You do, you just haven't heard that word. Our brains are plastic or moldable. The nervous system is moldable, it learns and grows. So neuroplasticity takes a documented 12 weeks to happen. You teach it something new and teach it something hard enough and it will adapt, and 12 weeks later you'll have a new system that's learning new things. So we apply that to the repair of peripheral nerves as well. If we can treat it, we treat it in that time period and get it to be as good as we can possibly do it, and then reevaluate, see where we are with that, right? Now the ones above 50%, those ones almost always get better. Almost always. They need less treatment. But they do need a lifestyle change forever, because you have a tendency towards neuropathic problems, and if you don't fix it, it's going away. It'll get worse again, okay? Any questions so far? Getting really good at explaining all this. Or I'm talking so far over everyone's head, no one's got it at all. Okay? So we know what neuropathy is, and we know what treatments are available for them, okay? At the Neuro Clinic and places like this, we just have a different approach. We're not so willing to just give up and try a drug. That's a big, huge thing for us to do. We have to find what we can do to make a difference in that nerve. Sometimes that's sometimes that's vibration, sometimes it's not. Sometimes, believe it or not, it's eye training. I won't go into that now, but the nervous system is all linked from head to toe, and the brain is in control of everything that's going on. So if you can't feel your feet, there might be other reasons for it. Okay? No questions at all. I expected you to be full of them. Go ahead.
First, my apologies for being late to everybody here, but you may have covered this, but can neuropathy be caused by a pinched nerve?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it can be caused by compression of that nerve, right? It could be caused by a rotation of the nerve. Any damage to the nerve could cause it. And it doesn't have to be complete damage of the nerve either. It doesn't have to be cut or severed. It can just be...
Have like a slipped disc or something like that
Yep.
could contribute to neuropathy.
Correct.
As well as
Yep.
other nerve issues.
The lumbosacral plexus, or the nerves that come from your lower back, right? They come down and wrap around your legs. So you identify which, or I identify which nerve is not working, and then set to work trying to specifically fix that nerve. Again, neuropathy doesn't have to be in just one nerve, though. Go ahead.
But in the case where if it's a bone slippage or something like that, can you fix the nerve without fixing the bone?
That's a good question. It depends. You have to take care of the problem, the damage problem, right? Wherever it's being caused. So if somebody has an L5 or an S1 disc problem in their back, their lower back, will you get change to the nerve without changing that? Usually not, right? Usually not. That doesn't mean you can't encourage it. You can do all kinds of different things for that. Luckily, I'm a chiropractor, so we do treat those kinds of things as well, right? We look at all of the different causes of it and try to figure it out that way. The cause is one of the things that's most indicative of what needs to be done, right? So let's say you fall from a hayloft or something like that, and you crush the nerve, and that problem it's an injury. So how do we fix that injury? Well, we go about it in a sensory pathway. We go about it in a motor pathway. Can you lift your foot? Can you push down? Can you move your toes? And we try to figure out what we can do to make that better. And like I said, sometimes we can't make that all go away, but sometimes we can. And so it is worth the examination to figure out what we can do and what can be done. The whole idea and the whole premise of the thing is to teach you what can be done so that you can keep doing it. Because the likelihood that we're going to change it and make it go away forever is not good if you're not on board. That make sense? Go ahead.
So I have a question about, you see advertisements on TV all the time about the walk-in clinic where they do a 1-inch incision and you walk out on your lower back and you don't have leg pain anymore or whatever. Are they severing a nerve at that?
It depends. I guess I'd have to see the commercial to see what they're implying.
Okay.
But a 1-inch scar, a lot of the discectomies, where they take the disc out of your lumbar spine, they're small incisions now. They're not major back surgeries like they once were.
Okay.
So they're getting better at those kinds of things. Sometimes they're just going in with a little bit of a laser or a scalpel and trimming off the edges of that. The way that the spine is actually created, so you have the body of the spine itself, and the disc fits in between those two bodies, but then the spinous process sticks out the back. A laminectomy means they'll relieve pressure on that disc by cutting off the back spiny part of the spine, right? They'll take that out. Just hope you don't bend over too far backwards, I guess. Just kidding. But sometimes they'll shore it up with metal or something like that. But they take that out of there, and the surgeries are getting more efficient. I won't say better results. Because if damage to the disc can actually cause the problem, so can scar tissue. The nerves are very sensitive. They can't feel that, so they'll change that way. Yep. Another common cause, like I was saying, is oxygen deprivation, and that one's pretty typical. If it's a systemic type of a problem, it won't just be one limb. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If it's just one limb, it's very unlikely that it's a blood sugar problem only. It's usually some kind of an impingement, like you were saying. Something's going on in here, or there are several places in each of the plexuses that can be changed. So this is the brachial plexus, this is the lumbosacral plexus. Those are the ones that most affect peripheral neuropathies, right? If we can identify, where in the nervous system those things don't work and find the entrapment site, sometimes you're fine through here and here, but your elbow is causing you a problem and it causes a neuropathy down this way. Those ones are usually simpler to fix. The ones that are difficult is where it's like you have fuzzy gloves and fuzzy socks on, right? They're difficult because they're systemic, but it could just be an iron deficiency or a B vitamin deficiency, and they're fairly easy to change if the nerves are not too dead. Yep. Go ahead.
Well, my doctor really didn't know what my problem was. I put my knee to my hip on this leg. It's numb. And so he was like, well, I think it might be sciatica or something. But I've always had a history of a hip rotation.
Okay.
And, walk on rough ground and my hip will go spasmodic.
Okay.
And so I learned how to set that straight. But it doesn't, it's just numb.
And you're saying it's
Will that
numb.
ever
It's
change?
numb here?
Yes, it's numb
Okay.
there.
So the pattern of the nerve up in here, this is more likely to be L3 than it is actually to be L4, 5, or S1. Those ones come down a different pattern in the leg. So L4, 5, S1 would be a rotation in the pelvis, which would cause what you're talking about. This one would be more likely to be up a little bit higher.
Okay.
Yep. So anything up in here. Closer it gets to your midline, the further up it is in your spine.
Well, they wanted like $120 for a visit to the physical therapist, and I didn't have it. So I just figured since it's numb, it's not in pain, so I can live with numb, not pain. Now, does numb ever turn to pain?
Yes,
Oh, it will.
it can.
Oh,
It doesn't have to.
right.
It doesn't have to, but it can.
All right.
Any time that and this is something that's interesting. Any time that nerve spends on vacation, if it comes back, it's weaker for it. The nervous system is designed to always be feeling and always know the feedback from the brain. So if you think about what the brain is trying to do from all of this stuff, right? Our smell, our sense of vision, our hearing, everything that we do with our senses and feeling from our legs goes into a map of what is happening around us. If we don't know what's happening around us, you're less capable of feeling this. Now, the argument is, how big of a deal is the inside of my thigh? I don't know, maybe not as big of a deal. But if you need big muscle from your leg, you need to lift something heavy, you're going to have to externally rotate it. You're more likely to actually hurt the hip at that point. So it can't do everything the way that it was designed to do it. So neuropathic pains right here would be a little bit different cause. That would not be necessarily a peripheral neuropathy. They usually start at the fingers and toes and work their way up. Go ahead.
If you're recording this and there being a picture on this is indicative of it being recorded, there's no picture.
Okay. Brian's in charge of all that stuff. We'll let him worry about it.
Okay.
What else? Any other questions?
Question.
Please.
If you have peripheral neuropathy and you do not have pain, is that indicative that the nerves are completely shot?
It doesn't have to be. I will say that typically pain is the last thing that you feel. But you may not be there yet. You might just feel the numbness and tingling, so those nerves are actually still intact. It would depend on what else you can feel. If you step on something, do you jump away with pain? Do your reflexes still work? That's why it's individual for every single person. And to be honest with you, neuropathies, there are hundreds of classes of the types of neuropathy that can happen and the causes of those. So, I mean, you could generalize. I could judge you based on your size and your shape and sex and all those other kinds of things and try to guess which kind you have. And that's where the neuropathy exam comes in so well, and that's what we do, right? Do the exam, figure out where you are, find a treatment plan that assesses, that addresses where you are, and try to get you away from that. So I guess I would say, if you're not too pain yet, we keep you as far away from that as we can. If you're past pain, we try to wake things up if there's still some hope for the nerve to come back. But you can still walk, so it's more likely that you're not there yet.
Okay, the second question I have is the neurologist concluded the only thing he could come up with as a cause for mine was statins.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, so statin drugs, they decrease your fats. Not your bad fats, not your bad cholesterol, they decrease all fats. Well, unfortunately, all of your nervous system is wrapped in fat, not all of it, but the fast nerves are wrapped in fat called myelin. Myelin sheathing is very sensitive to statin drugs, and you just don't regenerate that very quickly. So you get taking the statin drug, back pain, loss of balance, brain fog and fatigue, those kinds of things are very common with statin drug use. Unfortunately, they don't tell you that. They just tell you, you need this because your cholesterol is too high. Well, is it my good cholesterol or my bad cholesterol? What are we talking about here? It doesn't matter. Take the drug because I told you, that kind of a thing. So again, that goes into what else do we need to manage? Is it because you can't digest fat? Maybe your gallbladder is sluggish. There's all kinds of different things that you could go into to look at the actual cause of that instead of statins. But statins played into your weakness if that's the cause of it. You were already weak in that scenario and it made it weaker. Good question though. What else?
Would citrus bergamot help something like that? Because it's supposed to lower cholesterol, but do it naturally.
Here's a tricky distinction to make, okay? Just because it's natural does not mean it's safe.
Okay.
Cyanide is natural, right? It's occurring naturally. So there's lots of things out there that are natural that are devastating for you. Sugar is technically natural, maybe not in the kind and the quantity that we use, but it's natural. Mm-hmm. So the difficulty is you have to look at the mechanism of it. And if it's a mechanism anything like a statin drug, which is why it lowers your cholesterol, right? Technically, cholesterol is a marker of inflammatory response. You're swollen. Whatever causes you to be swollen is what needs to be addressed.
Okay.
So if something like that does cause a change in it, it probably addressed stomach acid issues, drove down maldigestion, made you digest better, and your fats went back up.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anything that can help you can hurt you, right?
Yeah, too much of it.
Any treatment, anything out there, and that's where the art comes in medicine, is where you look at it and you say, okay, I know this person needs a little bit of this, but too much will hurt. And there isn't anything out there that's good for every single person.
Right.
There's nothing, right? What about coffee? No. Coffee is an immune system stimulant. It's not good for everyone. It's good for some, right? What about oxygen? Well, people hyperventilate all the time, right? So lots of different things out there. You have to figure out what is individually best for you. Unfortunately, like we were saying, the difference is that what we do is considered palliative care, meaning, well, they're not in a wheelchair yet, so we're not really going to pay for this kind of thing to be addressed. We're not going to clip the nerve yet. They've still got some time left. We're not going to put them on gabapentin, or we are, to shut this down. With what we do, we look at this as, no. We are going to turn this nerve up and make it as healthy as it can possibly be, and actually rehabilitate the nervous system and the way the brain approaches it. So as we go through treatment protocols here, we're looking for a way to specifically, first of all, increase balance, because that's the thing that causes the most loss of autonomy. Then increase feeling, appropriate feeling in the nerve or nerves that are lost. And we do that sometimes with electrical stimulation, we do it with vibratory stimulation, we do it with hot and cold, we do it with changes to nervous system, with adjustments, all kinds of different things like that. We address each of the areas that could possibly be causing it. And after we do that, then we have a better idea of what kind of an approach it will make. Then we re-examine, right? Did we do a good job or not? If we did a good job and it still doesn't change, then the nerve is not revivable. And we try to find that out as quickly as possible, right? So we can come up with another strategy. Right? What other questions? So the big thing to take away is, what is a neuropathy? That nerve is just not happy for whatever reason, and it's reporting something it should not be reporting. Maybe it's reporting nothing when it should report something, or maybe it's reporting something when it should not, right? Polyneuropathy is multiple nerves all at once, whereas just a peripheral neuropathy is typically just one nerve, right? So it's important to have it diagnosed correctly and quantified so you can know what you're up against. That's what we do. Our exam is designed to do that. Find out what it is, find out where it is, and find out if it changes when we address it. Yep.
So what about if you're sleeping at night and you wake up and say one of your arms is numb and you have to literally, pick it up to make it?
Most commonly, that's a cervical disc problem in your neck. That's something that you're actually impinging it, mechanically impinging that nerve. It's no longer getting the oxygenation that it needs, and the fuel system drops off. It's a mechanical problem.
Okay.
It could be something else, but again, it's only one side, right?
Yeah.
So if it was, every time I sleep, I can't feel any of my limbs. Well, that's a whole different scenario, right?
Is that a chiropractor that would do that?
Do what?
Fix that issue?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But you're asleep, so you can't feel anything.
Well, until you wake up and it's throbbing, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Sleep is actually an interesting, it's a little bit off topic, but sleep is an interesting thing. Our brains should be able to shut down all feedback when we're unconscious. We should be asleep, right? Oh, I flip and flop and move all over the place when I'm sleeping. Well, you're not sleeping. Otherwise, you wouldn't be moving, right? Case in point, my 6-year-old. falls asleep on a beanbag chair and he's like dead to the world. You can drag him by one foot to his bed, he never wakes up. He's asleep, right? Whereas most of us, we wake up in the middle of the night and, oh, I had to get up and pee. No. You were awake, so your brain decided to take advantage of the fact that you had to pee, right? You were already awake. You have a mechanism in which you should be dampening that urinary problem, right? So a lot of those kinds of things happen, but you're right. Waking up in the middle of the night and can't feel my arm kind of a thing, that's usually mechanical compression, and it's coming from the neck. So you need to talk about disc height and changing those kinds of things. And there are mechanical problems. One of my favorite things about neurology is that we are a compilation of every neurologic experience we've ever had. Okay? Go all the way back to the day you were born. Every experience that you've had determines who you are now. Personality does not exist. We are a compilation of what we have experienced. Well, I don't like that. Well, you don't like it because of the way it made you feel when you did it, right? Or I perceive that I won't like that because I watched that guy get hit by a car when he did it, you know? We have all these ways to adapt and make ourselves different, right? So that's my favorite thing about neurology. And we use that, we can harness that to make an improvement. Every single person that I treat, I look at them as if their brain is what is most important, so that we can figure out how we can make them more stable, right? Whether that be decreasing anxiety attacks or getting rid of depression or, you know, a gut problem, an eye problem, all of those different things come into effect. So peripheral neuropathy, or any neuropathy, is right exactly what chiropractors should be attempting to do. And I think every practitioner should have to know all of the different aspects of the human body. Specialized medicine should not be a thing. We're just not good at it. Oh, I'll let that guy take care of your heart. I'll take care of your liver. Wait, the stuff you're giving me for my liver kills my heart. That's not my problem. I'm your liver doctor. You know what I mean? That doesn't work. We've got to have a different approach. So in taking in something like this, it's so far out of the box that it works. We work on people all the time and improve things. And sometimes it's instantaneous. Oh, I can't lift up my foot. Okay, what if I do this, this, and this? Hey, my foot works. Sometimes it's that fast. And other times it isn't. Other times we have to work on it a little bit longer. Okay? So we set up this class so we could introduce the idea of treating neuropathy from a different perspective altogether. Don't look at it as we just have to shut that nerve off. It's bad. That nerve is bad. Well, guess you're just old. That's not a very good treatment plan. If we look at it and we say, okay, what can we get this nerve to do? Maybe we can't get it all the way back, but maybe we can decrease the pain. Or maybe we can't get it all the way back, but we can make your balance a heck of a lot better and retrain you. Well, then we've improved your quality of life, and the whole journey has been worth it, right? And we can show you how to do it for good so that when you come upon something in life that changes it again, you know what to do, right? So because of this class, we're doing a little bit of a different thing. Normally we do an hour-long examination. Now we're going to do those examinations for this specific thing focused on neuropathy, okay? And that's for this class and for all of you who actually made it out here today. So we're going to do that at a discounted rate. We'll make it a little bit different for everybody that was here and answer your questions. Find out, most importantly, what is on that exam. And from the exam, then we recommend treatments based on how you did on the exam.